They can't change. I am who I am. I am part of what I'm part of, and I can never escape that. My circumstances will always be the same.
Yet again, the royal family implodes as Sarah Ferguson detonates a bomb of sensitive Meghan Markle yacht photos, and Harry's swift response will leave you shocked. News travels fast, but when it's Windsor news, the word travels even faster. Meghan's private yacht photos were allegedly leaked, and Harry is believed to be on a one-way flight to the United Kingdom. How damaging are these pictures to the Sussexes? Would Harry be quick enough to control the imminent danger? Join us as we discuss Prince Harry's decision to go to the United Kingdom. The haunt begins. Hell hath no fury as a woman scorned, and Sarah Ferguson has allegedly chosen to live up to that infamous billing. Sources believe that Prince Andrew's ex-wife Sarah, whom everyone considered the love of his life and his happily ever after, has come back to haunt the royal family, as she is still deeply hurt by her divorce from Prince Andrew. But how did it all begin? Over the years, Prince Andrew and Ferguson, popularly known as Fergie, have remained a talking point in the royal family. Andrew was the wild Windsor prince who made headlines for the most disturbing reasons anyone could imagine. He was the typical royal family spare. He always had little to do in terms of administrative duties and was nigh exempt from the serious restrictions that bound his brother Charles at the time. But a young man with an infinite amount of financial resources, friends in high places, expensive lawyers, and the Windsor name would always be the perfect textbook villain. No one is really stopping him. He cultivated a reputation as the fun prince, which was a completely different vibe from what Prince Charles represented at the time. But in all that fun and debauchery, he found a reason to walk someone down the aisle, and that person was Sarah Ferguson. The pair found love and got married at the age of 26 on July 23, 1968, at Westminster Abbey. Although Fergie's reputation seemed rather different from the popular Randy Andy's, her marriage to the prince had dragged her reputation into hell with his. She was the trophy wife, serving as a placating object to quell the raging storm of youth that supposedly blurred Andrew's life and ambition, allegedly spiraling him out of control. However, the marriage did not last more than 10 years, as Andrew had finally started taking some responsibility as a Windsor prince, which included service in the British military. He served in the Air Force in the early 90s, meaning that he only saw his wife 40 days a year. Caught between betrayal and an acute sense of duty and pride, Fergie allegedly stepped out on her marriage on more than one occasion with Steve Wyatt, and the marriage ended in 1996. Although she tried to save the marriage, the royal family was done with her, and Andrew was too, leaving her feeling betrayed and scorned. But she was not the type to let go of a grudge. She had been dating Andre since the 1980s and knew him even longer. She saw every party, watched every yacht cruise, and had an inkling of the debauchery that went on behind the scenes. But beyond simple word of mouth, sources close to her believe she had pictures dating back to the mid-80s and going all the way to the mid-thousands, allegedly capturing images of the infamous Jeffrey Epstein and Meghan Markle. How will Harry respond to the possibility of his world getting obliterated? The Sussexes on a string again. The Sussexes are no strangers to PR hell, with their once glowing reputation facing the possibility of going down the drain yet again. For some context, their marriage was always a talking point in the United Kingdom. A black Hollywood queen and a prince of the British monarchy. Although Prince Harry was the infamous spare, he was still a Windsor prince, and that comes with some serious charm. It's a tale girls forever giggle about, an actual Prince Charming. However, rumors of decadence and moral rot from Meghan's stories of the Windsors seem to stink up the old walls of Buckingham, and the top brass royals were not having any of it. Entering 2020, the Sussexes, especially Harry, tried to mend the collapsing bridges and somehow tried to bring his original family together with his marriage, without losing either side to prejudice or malice. But one can only tug at the heels of so many hearts and rub that many egos without necessarily hurting anyone. When the time came to make a choice, he made the hardest one. He chose to let go of one of the families. It was a moment at the crossroads of his heart, flipping his coin toward clarity and peace, knowing the wager was to sacrifice the family he grew up with. Yet he paid the price in full, leaving the country of his birth and moving to the United States with Meghan and the kids in 2020. Finally, he found clarity, peace, and acceptance in a foreign land, where he wielded less power than he did over his family's happiness. However, the times look bleak again, and his new perfect world of sunshine and rainbows seems to darken yet again. Sources close to the Sussexes, especially Harry, claimed he had received a phone call just a few weeks before Christmas, somewhere in the estate at Montecito. According to the sources at the estate, he appeared distraught, frustrated that the call ended. Other sources in the Montecito estate believe it was his past calling and haunting him for a return to the United Kingdom to clean up a mess that one half of the Sussexes had made. And now he is on the verge of a return to the home that chewed him up and spat him out, the United Kingdom. But these raised more questions than answers. What makes Meghan such an easy target to be rolled into the company of the likes of Randy Andy and possibly Jeffrey Epstein? Hollywood backrooms. Before the weighted Windsor crown became part of her accessories, Meghan was Hollywood's big black queen, who made her way to the top of the food chain from the bottom of the barrel. She went from being the briefcase girl on the popular Deal or No Deal show to playing Rachel Zane, a hotshot lawyer in the popular series Suits. Being an established Hollywood star meant a couple of things, but one was being an image queen, someone who knew how to play the cards whenever optics were in question. However, her sudden rise to the top of the echelon, which some have described as the fruits of hard work, has been described by others as the same old Hollywood backroom antics. The Hollywood underworld has been known to be a rather dark place where every fat, rich producer or director controls how the Hollywood world tilts and who dares to benefit from that tilt. The inferences were rather basic, but they made sense. A beautiful brunette girl from a show suddenly playing Rachel Zane in Suits had to have been a result of something more sinister than hard work or dumb luck. It is rarely news that there are many young, beautiful actresses who tend to offer more than just talent for opportunities. In rumored cases, they offer themselves to the fat cats of the Hollywood underworld leaders who sit in the corridors of power and give their careers that urgent boost to sling them right into the spotlight and make them superstars. A perfect example of that was Harvey Weinstein, the disgraced Hollywood producer, who was charged with misconduct and is currently in jail for 16 years. Harvey was a downright menace who had top actresses like Ashley Judd, Gwyneth Paltrow, Angelina Jolie, and Rose McGowan coming out of their shells to speak about his conduct and how it seemed to take precedence over their job together. Although Meghan's rise to fame is well documented, the Hollywood underworld and the popular role phenomenon already taint her world with a dangerous narrative. Her problems did not really come from evidence. It was optics. When she arrived in the Windsor family, she was not just some girl who was privileged enough to find herself in the sight of a red-headed British prince who happened to be looking for love. She arrived as a woman of her own, with her own mind, and would not curtsy to anyone who was beneath her. Hence, it was not too hard to see why she was targeted by British media and, allegedly, other members of the British family, including Kate Middleton and Prince William. While she had finally escaped the royal family's overwhelming attention, recent rumors that Sarah Ferguson has been found in pictures on a yacht with some rather unflattering names, like Jeffrey Epstein and Prince Andrew, threatened to open a can of worms. But what makes associating with Randy Andy a rather vile thing to do? Randy Andy. Talking about cleaning up a reputation, it is safe to say that the royal family outdid itself on erasing the Randy Andy tag that had followed Prince Andrew around like a thick dark fog and clouded the Windsor name, along with Prince Andrew's reputation. He had been on what most would call a journey to redemption, forging himself into the spare that the citizens of the United Kingdom deserved. For a long time, he had been considered a changed man. So much so that a generation after his Randy Andy years in the mid-80s had become used to the cleaner, sober, and definitely older Prince Andrew, the working royal with a knack for the biggest smile on Trooping the Colours Day. But beneath all that smile lies a very familiar social monster who had been lying deep in the belly of the beast for a long time, waiting for the right company to rub its ego and roll out the carpet to welcome him with both hands. And that company was Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein was the perfect man-monster who knew how to tap into the most dangerous excess of men with serious money in their pockets. The deeper the pocket run, the more inclined he was to sponsor their illicit indulgences, ranging from finding them their favorite controlled substances to bringing them younger individuals, as the civil suit says, scratching a rather illegal itch. Such was the company that the good prince kept from the mid to late 90s. At first, not much was thought of their camaraderie in the 90s, as it simply appeared as a popular forensic accountant from the United States meeting one of the most dignified persons of the House of Windsor. However, as the years progressed, the scales had suddenly begun to fall off, and most people could see that Prince Andrew had yet again dragged the Windsor name into Epstein-sized muck. But what exactly followed after this exposure? Prince Andrew was not immediately thrown to the wolves. Bringing the Windsor name to its knees as a result of heavy partying with the wrong folks was definitely not his first rodeo, and the family cleaning up after him was no discovery either. However, Jeffrey Epstein wasn't some little hiccup they could drown in a tsunami of PR. Jeffrey was a different monster. It didn't take long before he started unraveling the carefully curated image that had been built over years of intense work, which mainly included administrative duties, being in front of the camera, and playing his part as a responsible working royal who cared about the citizens and denizens of the United Kingdom. Suddenly, a relationship that had passed as an overlap between two of the world's biggest countries became the same stick the global media beat the royal family and Prince Andrew with. But just how damaging were the allegations that came right into the picture? Damaging claims from the Epstein files. The prince claimed that he had only ever first met the repeat offender, who was suspected of human trafficking back in 1999. According to him, there was no way that he could have known that he was in bed with a monster. While he held an interview with Emily Maitlis of the BBC, he claimed that he had been wrongfully accused by association. He described Epstein as a charmer who invited him to the dinner parties where he met academics, politicians, and people from the United Nations. To him and anyone who saw from the outside, it was simply a cosmopolitan group of what can be described as U.S. eminence. However, the allegations levied against him were much heavier than being at a few parties or how they met. The first widely reported allegation came in 2014, when Virginia Giuffre described a rather implicating scenario, raising the opinion that she had been trafficked to him well over a decade ago, and Randy Andy had activity with her on 3 different occasions before she turned 18. Obviously, it was a damning allegation, and it weighed heavily, even too heavily, on the Windsor name. No cleanup crew was capable of letting that go. This time, he had to face it head-on. But it was a dogfight. Hence, he needed an army of lawyers to argue his case in court, or negotiate a settlement out of court, which made it impossible for Giuffre to ever speak of this again. But regardless of how the situations played out, there was a chance that his reputation was nosediving straight into freefall. But how did it all play out? Virginia Giuffre, in a 2019 interview with the BBC, said she was introduced to Prince Andrew by Epstein and his then-girlfriend, socialite Ghislaine Maxwell, who took them to a nightclub. Then she was instructed to do as she had done to Jeffrey to the Duke upstairs at Ms. Maxwell's house in Belgravia. On the second count, they allegedly recreated the experience in Epstein's mansion in New York. But the Duke was allegedly going for a hat trick of the situation. Hence, they returned to Epstein's private island, Little St. James, in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and recreated the experience. If the allegations stuck and he were charged, the Duke of York would be looking at some decades in prison for not only engaging in erotic practices with a kid, but also being one of the sleazebags who aided and abetted Epstein's crimes. The blowback was heavy on the Windsor name, and no slick interview could clean up the mess. However, by February 2022, Prince Andrew's legal team and Jeffrey's had reached an agreement to settle out of court. Although the details of the settlement fee were not released to the public, it was still enough to spark an uproar worldwide. The case had been settled, but the court of public opinion was still in session. The unanswered question remains that if he weren't guilty, why would he have to pay? Was he simply tired of the scrutiny, or was he just another royal monster who could shut everyone up with his money? Although there are no answers, or at least not one anyone was willing to give, the scrutiny remains. But just how did Sarah Ferguson get caught up in all this storm? Sarah Ferguson fits Meghan into the Epstein jigsaw. If there was a woman who knew Prince Andrew and Epstein better than most, it was Sarah Ferguson. However, it's no surprise, as they were married for 10 whole years anyway. Sarah was a children's book author with the popular Little Red series as one of her most famous works. As expected, Sarah had enough involvement with Jeffrey Epstein to draw a parallel between him, his parties, and his habits. Back in 2011, Sarah described her relationship with Epstein, who had been jailed 3 years earlier for soliciting prostitution from a minor, as an error in judgment. She could have stayed silent to protect their friendship, but that has a strong possibility of ruining her career. The proof was in the pudding. She writes books for minors, and now she has a close affiliation with a man who was convicted of charges of trafficking minors for prostitution. It was obviously counterintuitive not to make a statement about it. Hence, it was no surprise that she immediately had him in the line of fire in her interviews, going right at him for everything he had done and claiming explicitly how much she hated him. But the question that has bothered everyone remained the same. Was it just PR to save her career while being in touch with him privately? Or was it out of genuine concern? That question had remained unanswered for a long time, until September 2025, when her emails to Epstein were leaked to the press, where she was apologizing for detaching herself from him in this moment of need. "I know you feel hellaciously let down by me from what you were either told or read, and I must humbly apologize to you and your heart for that," the email read. Once the email was leaked, Sarah's career immediately fell flat on its face. First, she was immediately dropped by huge charities, including Julia's House, a children's hospice charity, the Teenage Cancer Trust, Natasha Allergy, Research Foundation, Children's Literacy Charity, National Foundation for Retired Service Animals, and Prevent Breast Cancer. Also, the British Heart Foundation immediately revoked her presence as its ambassador, although her spokesperson had flatly denied that she wrote the email because she wanted to, and instead claimed it was a counterintelligence response to Jeffrey's threats to defame her. Public opinion overruled this as damage control and showed no interest in another one of the royals' mini games. She was obviously aboard a sinking ship all by herself. However, in a bid to steer out of this trouble, she seems to be forcing more hands on deck, and who better than the spare who left home with his American wife? The three-way captains of a sinking ship. Fergie's September howler had been the talk of the British media since the emails leaked. Although she had tried wiggling her way out of this tight spot she created for herself, The noose had only gotten tighter. While no one can tell how or if she plans to save her career, sources close to the Duchess believe that she had flipped fate's game over its head and played a hand she had dealt herself, dragging Meghan into this mess with her. In 2001, Prince Andrew and Epstein went on holiday together and were pictured on a yacht in Phuket, Thailand, surrounded by topless young women. In the same year, the Times of London reported that the prince's holiday to Thailand had been explicitly sponsored by Epstein, which somewhat waters down the prince's claims that he barely ever knew him. But while everyone else debated the extent of their relationship, Fergie, who could tell the nature of their relationship owing to her close ties with both parties, allegedly had more pictures from the event on that yacht. Sources close to her believe these are sensitive photos of a younger Meghan Markle, which would explain quite a lot about her relationship with Epstein and, more importantly, the real intentions behind her decision to testify in the Virginia Giuffre case against Prince Andrew before it was settled out of court. Suddenly, she was once again towing a line back to the country that she ran away from, in a bid to save her family from the pungent stench of the royal family's alleged rot. Now it's a trifecta of wounded lions who are hounded by the ghosts of Jeffrey Epstein's past and some of his unreleased files, hanging somewhere in the United States justice system. Speaking of the Epstein files, the United States released a new batch of information on Jeffrey Epstein's atrocities, and some of them included money laundering and substantial emails that reveal communications between co-conspirators who served as financiers of his extremities and excesses. While names have not been released yet, some sources say Meghan Markle's name has been mentioned, though there is no confirmation. Although the investigation remains ongoing, and there are names in the mix that have not committed any wrongdoing, sources claim that the risk still seemed too steep for Harry to ignore. Unwilling to take the chance of waiting and seeing how it all plays out, the spare, Prince Harry, has been rumored to rush back to the United Kingdom, hoping to find evidence of the alleged Sarah Ferguson sensitive yacht photos of his wife. Whether he finds these alleged pictures or it's just another source crying wolf, only time will tell. Do you think that he possibly finds anything suspicious in the United Kingdom? Would Sarah Ferguson really be petty enough to force Harry and Meghan back to the United Kingdom with false proof? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.